So, we like to think that engineering reviews and boardroom meetings are all just data and blueprints, right? Like pure, unfeeling logic.
Yeah, right up until the actual humans enter the room.
Exactly. I mean, the second you have to defend those blueprints, it just becomes this massive verbal minefield. You're suddenly navigating egos, dodging blame, and trying to align a room full of highly opinionated people.
Which is exactly why today's deep dive into high-stakes professional communication is so crucial for you. We're pulling from this really fascinating presentation on technical discussions, looking at 5 specific phrases that seasoned pros use to, well, manage the psychology of the room. It's not just about knowing the jargon, it's about framing decisions.
Right. So, okay, let's unpack this starting with when things go wrong. A project fails and everyone immediately wants to point fingers. The source brings up the phrase in hindsight, which is literally, backward vision.
Right, and they use that example of realizing in hindsight that a more heat-resistant alloy was needed for the planetary gears.
Which is such a classic scenario. It's basically like Monday morning quarterbacking, but for high-level engineering.
Yes, exactly. And it sounds like this basic conversational transition, but strategically. Saying in hindsight is a brilliant psychological tool. Because when you say, in hindsight, we needed that alloy, you're actively removing the personal blame.
Oh, because you're shifting the room's focus away from who messed up.
Right, you're shifting it to what did we learn given the new data?
It completely defangs the situation. You acknowledge the misstep without triggering anyone's defensive reflexes.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is that once you've successfully de-escalated that tension, it usually forces an immediate shift in priorities. That's where you let certain factors take a back seat.
Moving from the driver's seat to the back seat, like the source's scenario where cost concerns suddenly take a back seat to technical reliability.
Right.
But honestly, if you're the project manager, aren't you just admitting to the whole room that you've lost control of the budget?
Well, not necessarily. You're actually taking control of the narrative there.
Wait, really?
Yeah, by publicly declaring that cost is taking a back seat, you're providing your engineering team with the psychological safety they need to focus purely on quality. Like they no longer have to fear budget reprimands for just fixing the critical problem.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So that covers the internal team dynamics. But what about client interactions? Because the source talks about the necessity to keep a straight face, keeping your facial lines unchanged, especially when a client demands a completely unrealistic deadline.
Right, the classic poker face.
Yeah.
But it's not about suppressing your emotions or pretending to be a robot. It's actually about professional leverage.
How so?
I mean, if a client demands the impossible and you scoff or you look visibly panicked, you've instantly lost your negotiating power.
Ah, so you're just buying yourself the 3 seconds you need to formulate a strategic response instead of a reactive one. You're controlling the temperature of the room.
Exactly. And often, that strategic response involves pulling out a rule of thumb to manage their expectations on the fly.
Which comes from literal thumb measurement, right? Like telling a client you need to check the lubricant levels every 500 hours of operation. It's a quick, practical baseline to keep the meeting moving.
Relying on practical experience rather than strict experiments, yes.
But here's my issue with that. Engineers usually hate shortcuts. If I just tell a frustrated technical team that, as a rule of thumb, we do it this way, aren't I just dismissing their need for rigorous analysis with a cliche?
You absolutely are. Which is why a rule of thumb is dangerous if used in isolation. It's an educated baseline to appease stakeholders quickly, but it immediately creates friction with the technical side.
Oh, wow. Okay, so what does this all mean? How do you fix that?
That's precisely the moment you have to get everyone on the same page, the visual of everyone looking at the exact same book page.
Like the source brings up regarding a shipping schedule, getting the engineers and the clients to agree on the timeline.
Right, but notice it's not just about agreeing, it's about committing to a compromise. Getting on the same page means the engineers accept the rule of thumb for now, and the stakeholders understand the technical limitations of that shortcut. It meshes those two opposing forces together so work can actually proceed.
It really is a complete journey. You start by using in hindsight to safely evaluate past errors. You shift priorities, maintain your composure under pressure, establish practical baselines, and finally align those competing interests toward the future goal.
And thinking about the future, there's an interesting implication here. These phrases, rule of thumb on the same page, they all rely on tactile physical objects, thumbs, books.
Right, very analog references.
Exactly. So as our workspaces become increasingly digital and AI-driven, you really have to wonder, How long until these physical metaphors disappear completely? Like, what entirely new digital idioms will we invent to negotiate the boardroom of the future?
In the same instance, maybe. Who knows? But for you listening, while the boardroom will always be a verbal minefield, the map we use to navigate it is definitely evolving.